I'm Kyle Clark. This is Next, and this is the History Colorado Center in Denver, site of the one and only televised debate in the race for U.S. Senate in Colorado. We are 60 minutes away. I'll be joined in this half hour as we talk about the race and the space by the chairman of the Colorado Republican and Democratic parties, as well as my co-moderator this evening, Brandon Ritteman, as we provide you with a transparent look into how these debates and how the debate questions are formed. First, though, another leading Colorado Republican is washing his hands of Donald Trump. Today, former Governor Bill Owens, the only Republican elected governor in Colorado since 1970, said he cannot stomach the idea of voting for Donald Trump. He called him a charlatan who's attacking Owens' Republican Party. His comments on Facebook this morning didn't mention who he planned to vote for president, whether he'll even vote in that race. He urged Republicans to focus on down-ballot races and to rebuild their party following the election. Owens wrote that the Republican Party, quote, has been temporarily captured by a narcissist who will throw us aside after doing his best to destroy us, just as he has thrown aside so many of his properties and ventures. In politics, both nationally and on the state level, it is often a thin line between a powerful statement and a cheap stunt. We will let you decide what to make of the recent effort by some state leaders who are trying to convince Coloradans to approve a minimum wage increase. They're living on the minimum wage to try and make a point. Here's Victoria Sanchez.
If you make Colorado's minimum wage and work full-time, you get a take-home pay of less than $333 a week. Colorado Families for a Fair Wage, the group in support of the statewide pay increase, says once you subtract housing and taxes, you end up with very little.
That leaves you about $110 a week to live on for everything else, which is around $15 a day for food, for transportation, for entertainment, for emergencies, for anything else you need.
For each of the next 3 days, State Senator Mike Johnson is going to live on the $15.
I think it's kind of tacky and tasteless that they're trying to take situations of poverty and use it as a political tactic.
Tyler Sandberg is the campaign manager for Keep Colorado Working, the group opposed to the ballot's wage increase and challenge.
I've been very clear that this is in no way living the real life of someone who's living on $8 an hour. I'm walking in their shoes for a scarce couple of days is nothing like living it all year round. But for me, it's been a deep reminder of all the things that I take for granted about costs.
He admits he doesn't worry about where his next meal comes from and that this challenge is putting things in perspective. Sandberg says while low-paid workers need more money, the current ballot measure just doesn't work.
You're forcing a small family-owned store on Main Street in Alamosa to pay the same starter wage increase as a Walmart in Denver. That's not fair and that's not feasible.
And just to say there ought to be a common expectation for a livable wage, whether you're in Alamosa or downtown Denver, seems to me a fair expectation.
I'm Victoria Sanchez for Next.
We wanted your voice to be part of the conversation on this. We've been talking about it throughout the day on the Next with Kyle Clark Facebook page, and a couple of striking comments I thought were worth sharing with you here tonight. Graciela Guevara writes, are they serious? If this is real, it sounds like a really bad joke. This is humiliating for people who actually have to live and support a family with minimum wage. And Chuck McLean wrote, a true test would be a month with all expenses included at minimum wage. Anybody can get by for 3 days. The impact would be for a month. End of the month, you're looking for anything that'll give you nourishment, and you don't have the money to do it. Our Senate debate is coming up at 7 p.m. on Channel 20, streamed live on 9news.com, and we are coming to you from a beautiful, fairly new space here in downtown Denver, the History Colorado Center. If you haven't been down here, it's designed to help Coloradans understand the past, to make sense of the present, to make informed decisions about the future. History Colorado, of course, collects the artifacts of the people and places that have made up our state, and it has a changing selection of galleries that present topics from the serious to the lighthearted. History Colorado is a great place to come if you like to nerd out over political history, and they prepared a buffet of nerd food for us today, specifically political election pins. The oldest in Colorado's collection is a William Jennings Bryan pin from 1908. Great opportunity to say for the first time on Next, you shall not crucify us on a cross of gold. You don't see a ton of campaign pins these days. You better not see any in the audience tonight because they are prohibited, as are all shirts and signs. But the collection here does include some more recent campaign pins, including a 2004 Pete Coors. It's astonishing to look at the pins and see how little about them changes over time. Well, it's a shame that you cannot collect political vitriol because this season, especially the presidential race, is just chock full of it. A history professor at CU Denver told us today that although this election seems unlike anything that we have seen in our lifetimes, when you look at it through the lens of history, it's not all that unusual. For starters, it's not strange to have two unique candidates who come into the race with steamer trunks full of baggage.
How are these candidates so different from those in the past?
Why these particular candidates have come to the forefront, I think what you are seeing, at least in part, is that they had a very strong reputation and they were already well known before really they became presidential candidates for this particular cycle.
When comparing this election to years past, what time period comes to mind?
In the 1960s, as you're starting to have a series of civil rights movements and movements towards kind of individual liberties, for many people, Barry Goldwater's campaign was seen as moving the United States back quite a bit, particularly in terms of kind of society. I think many people today who are very threatened by Donald Trump would make the argument that many of his arguments, right, are threatening to where they see society is at today.
Barry Goldwater, of course, got torched by Lyndon Johnson. History. Professor Whiteside says it's easy to think that this particular presidential election is unique. That just happens to be because we're living through it. He says the real history, of course, is written with the perspective of a lot of years. There's also history being written in Colorado's U.S. Senate race this year, in which the Democratic incumbent Senator Michael Bennet is facing his Republican challenger Darrell Glenn, an El Paso County commissioner. I'm joined now by the chairman of the Republican and Democratic parties, Republican Chairman Steve House and Democratic Chairman Rick Palacio. Thank you both for being here for tonight's debate in this beautiful space and making some time for us now. First, to each of you about what you hope to see out of your candidate tonight. What is the case, Steve, that Darrell Glenn needs to make against Senator Bennet?
Well, first of all, that Michael Bennet really hasn't done much for us as a state, and he's done some damage. Obamacare, the Iran deal, some of the things that have happened on his watch that he supported are hurting the country, they're hurting the state. People in the state right now are paying $2,400, $5,000 deductibles on Obamacare, a law that he supported. He can't explain why, and obviously promises were broken, and I think Darrell needs to make that an issue tonight.
And Rick, what's the case that you want to see Senator Bennet make tonight?
Well, I think that Senator Bennet has been a bipartisan leader in the Senate. He's gotten a lot done. He has shown that he will work with anyone, Republican or Democrat, in order to accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish as a country. And I think that what we need to hear from Darrell Glenn tonight is a couple explanations. I mean, one, how does he expect to do anything in Washington if he thinks that bipartisanship is part of the problem? And two, why is it an issue for him? He's implied that pregnancies that have resulted out of rape are gifts from God. And I think that Coloradans deserve answers to both of those things.
To be clear, in case that comes up tonight, I think you're talking about all pregnancies, which of course would include pregnancies conceived in rape. Steve, let me ask you a situation that Darrell has. Darrell Glenn has a plethora of positions on Donald Trump, supported him, called on him to drop out of the race. Now he's somewhere in the middle. Do you know where your candidate is on this? Does he support Donald Trump?
I don't think it matters that much whether he does or not. First of all, I think he's got to run his own race. He's got to be able to go out there and talk about his record. By the way, when you talk about Michael Bennet being bipartisan and you look at the fact that the last 2 years he's supported President Obama's agenda 100% of the time. Prior to that, and overall, it's 98%. You can talk bipartisan, but if you haven't acted that way, accusing your opponent of not being bipartisan is just not right, ultimately.
In our closing seconds here, Rick, Senator Bennet has doubled down on this Iran nuclear deal, which he supported. He said that he has zero regrets. Is that what we're going to hear from him tonight? Zero regrets?
I think that you're going to hear from Michael Bennet that we're at a safer, a better place because of the Iran nuclear deal than without it.
All right, Rick Palacio, chair of the Colorado Democratic Party, and Steve House, chair of the Republican Party. Thank you, gentlemen. We're looking forward to a great debate tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Me too.
All right, just because we take next on the road does not mean that we dispense with my all-time favorite segment, so I must ask again, is the A-line working today? RTD's train to the plane. Wait for it? Nope. You know it wasn't. A-line was down early this morning. It is back up and running tonight if anybody needs to get out of Dodge. So now a lot of people have also been asking us about the G line. That's the line between Union Station and Wheat Ridge, stops in Old Town Arvada. Still scheduled to open sometime in the fall, RTD says. We checked the calendar, and apparently fall officially lasts until sometime in December, so don't get anxious about the opening of the G line. We will keep you updated. You know who is anxious? Steve Stager, because he's going to pick things up from here. We will return to History Colorado in just a bit as Brandon Ritteman and I take you behind the scenes of debate prep. But here you go, Steve. Keys are in your hands.
I'm anxious because it kind of looks like you're on a field trip. Thanks, Kyle. Well, the new G line means quite a few changes in Arvada, but some things will stay the same.
it's neat to see something consistent in all those pictures.
The photos that made us embrace our inner historical nerd. And I'm wearing pink for a reason, to raise money and awareness for breast cancer. But this is also a competition, and my campaign's about to go negative. A company from Westminster is giving a look from a unique angle of the destruction from Hurricane Matthew. Digital Globe, company that does Earth imagery taken from satellites, took these pictures of 6 Haitian towns. These are pictures from before and after the hurricane hit the area. The towns are along the western side of Haiti's southern peninsula. More than 500 people were killed in Haiti when the hurricane hit last week.
Hi, Steve. I'm meteorologist Kathy Sabin, and we're tracking another hurricane on the heels of Matthew, which has moved back out to sea. And we're also tracking a cool front here in Colorado that has brought in a few light rain and snow showers to the higher terrain. Cooler air already starting to move in. After highs today near 80, we'll see a 20-degree drop in temperature tomorrow with the arrival of that front in just a few hours. How cold is the air? Well, we're sitting in the mid-60s now, and we have current readings up around Billings and Rapid City in the mid-30s. There is not a lot of moisture coming in with this most recent system, but there is a little bit of thunder snow up high and isolated showers, thunder and lightning coming across the foothills as well. That cool air is going to settle in, but only for one day, and the moisture is so limited. We'll be hard pressed to see a shower, and we really could use the moisture down here. Brief rain and snow shower on the I-70 corridor and a little drizzle when you step out tomorrow morning, but I've got midday clearing and a warm up that kicks off again on Thursday. So tonight, kind of cool and cloudy with areas of fog and drizzle. Are low at 38. Tomorrow it's going to be chilly, cloudy with fog in the morning and drizzle. 58 will be your high in the afternoon. But check out the planning forecast. We're back to the mid-70s on Thursday, 80s for Friday. The weekend looks great. What's not looking so great, Steve, is Hurricane Nicole. The eastern seaboard very fearful of this storm, which looks like it will stay offshore for now.
Many thanks, Kathy. Back here at the History Colorado Center, where we are roughly 46 minutes away from the one and only debate in the U.S. Senate race, the one and only televised debate, I should say, in the U.S. Senate race between the Democratic incumbent Senator Michael Bennet and his Republican challenger Darrell Glenn. I'll be co-moderating tonight, along with politics guy Brandon Rittiman, who you see frequently on Next, rarely wearing a jacket. I feel like both of us are going to a funeral or a wedding or something. We're so dressed up.
It's not our normal garb in this space.
No, it is not. Okay, so the questions. Who knows the questions that we're going to ask ahead of time?
You know them. I know them. And a couple of other staffers from 9 News know them, and nobody else.
Our boss likes to hear them just to make sure there's no naughty words or things like that. Question, when did we finalize our last question for tonight's 7 o'clock debate on Channel 20 and 9news.com?
I think we're done.
So, if something were to happen...
I just hit print before I ran out here to talk to you.
If something were to happen, but the goal is that we want to have something that is not just a rehash that these guys have been talking about for the last 6 months. We want to be able to talk about the events of the day and to hear from them on important, pressing issues. People will often ask, as a moderator, what's your philosophy on when to interrupt and when to let somebody run?
Yeah, I think, typically you want to hear from them, right? If they're talking over each other and the audience can't understand what's going on, that's a good time to interrupt. If they're over time, obviously, we've got to keep things on the rails. That's a time to interrupt. Other than that, we try to let them go.
Thank you so much, Brandon. 7 o'clock begins the debate between Michael Bennet and Darrell Glenn from History Colorado. You can watch on 9news.com. You can also watch on Channel 20. And you can actually influence the course of the debate by going to 9news.com/vote now. Beginning at 7 o'clock, you'll be able to vote in live polls on the topics we're discussing so people can see where the viewing public is on what we're talking about. And then you can also help guide the debate by picking a topic that we're going to discuss at greater length. Get to work on that last question.
All right.
Brandon and I try not to talk over each other if at all possible, and that is also the goal daily for me and Steve Steger.
Yeah, we don't talk over each other too much, do we?
Not at all. No, we never do. Nope, not one.
Looks pretty nice out there, Kyle. We're looking forward to it. Thanks.
It does indeed. Thank you very much.
Some kind words from you about my mission to raise awareness for breast cancer, and some tough words from one of my competitors.
Have you heard about Bachelor Ben Higgins?
I'm about to throw some shade with the political ad I could never afford to place. And a fresh coat of paint for a landmark you and probably several generations of your family could have passed. Next. We're trying to make a point, all of us guys wearing pink during October. We're trying to raise awareness and money for breast cancer research. But a color can't share what I've heard over the last week. All the people writing to share their personal stories, like Deb, who lost her sister to cancer 6 years ago and still thinks about her every day. Or Tina, who tweeted in support. She's a 9-year survivor. Keep the stories coming. I want to share them. But on a lighter note, I told you one of the guys I'm competing against is Ben Higgins, the Bachelor. He lives in Denver. I've noticed he's beating me in fundraising, so as a student of politics, I know when the numbers are down, sometimes you have to hit first.
I'm Steve Steger, and I approve this message.
Have you heard about Bachelor Ben Higgins? 9news.com says Higgins, a grown man, got trapped in an elevator. What is he hiding? Who gets stuck in an elevator? Seriously? Not Steve Steger. In his 30 years on this earth, he's never once been stuck in an elevator.
Which floor?
1, please.
1.
Thank you.
And his 9 News colleagues say Steger is an excellent elevator operator, always getting them to the right floor. Real men don't just wear pink. They also know how to operate elevators. Next with Kyle Clark is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Bring it, Ben. As for the rest of you, thank you for all the support. We're at it all month, so you can keep going. Well, here at Next, we like to nerd out a lot, so you can imagine our joy when we got a news release from the city of Arvada with photos from the turn of the 20th century. So often in news, we focus on the new. It's sometimes cool to step back and take a look at the old.
It's become an iconic symbol for our community.
The news is about the water tower getting a fresh coat of paint just in time for the new RTD G line to launch right next to it. What we love is the history.
So when Arvada was first incorporated, water supply came from individual wells and there was no city water supply.
Check out these historic photos of Arvada back in 1910.
Really made Arvada into a center that became what it is today.
So much has changed, yet one thing remains the same.
It's neat to see something consistent in all those pictures, which is, of course, the water tower.
The 106-year-old tower is Arvada's identity, the stamp to anyone from around here that says, you're home. People like Arvada Councilman John Marriott.
In my younger, more foolish days, I actually will admit to having been on top of this water tower.
The city couldn't get us up there to see the view he risked his teenage life for, but they did give us this video. The view from up there has changed a lot, too.
That water tower was a first of its kind back in 1910. May I make a recommendation? Usually it isn't something that is ours, but is awesome. But in this case, it is ours, and it's also worth the read. Our hilarious web producer, Allison, well, she took a 30-day challenge, drinking a gallon of water every day for 30 days. Her goal? To be more like Beyonce along the way. She discovered some pluses and negatives. We're not going to tell you if she is, in fact, more like Beyonce now. You'll have to read it for yourself on 9news.com.
Debate feedback now from History Colorado ahead of our U.S. Senate debate. Mike Lane with a very fair question. Why didn't you invite Lily Tang Williams? She's the Libertarian candidate. Our threshold for entrance into these debates, it has been for several election cycles now on 9 News, is 10% in 2 polls, and the candidates could pick whichever polls they wanted. In this case, only the 2 main party candidates passed that 10% threshold. The other half dozen or so candidates in the race failed to meet that threshold. Mike S., nice job with the propaganda images when you were comparing Trump to Goldwater. That wasn't the intent. It's actually headed for more of a Reagan-Mondale result in Colorado. That was the last 10-point spread. We'll see you next time. We'll see you for the debate, 7 o'clock, Channel 20.